It is 8 GMT, 11 a.m. in Gaza, which has been under non-stop bombardment by Israel for a fourth day. These are live pictures of the skies over the Gaza Strip. People waking up this morning to scenes of destruction. There are growing concerns about the humanitarian situation in the besieged Palestinian territory as Israel has cut off supplies of food, water, fuel and electricity and imposed a total siege of Gaza. More than 700 Palestinians have been killed, including 140 children. The spokesman for the military wing of Hamas has warned it will begin executing Israeli captives if Israel bombs residential areas in Gaza without warning. Now, we're getting some exclusive pictures coming from hospitals in Gaza where there's a severe shortage of supplies. At least 700 Palestinians have been injured, more than 200 of them children. Gaza's health ministry has accused Israel of targeting its ambulances, injuring paramedics. And in addition to the shortage of medical supplies, a food crisis is looming. The United Nations says it's been forced to close all 14 food distribution centers, affecting 500,000 people. Now, 3 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on a residential building in western Gaza. Others are reportedly injured. Meanwhile, Israel says it's retaken control of the Gaza border and mobilized its troops in the area. These are pictures of southern Israel, where you can see a military buildup there in the background. So far, the military has called up 300,000 reservists. Well, we've got a team of correspondents on the ground in Washington, D.C., West Jerusalem, in Gaza, of course, as well. And that's where we begin with Yumna Al-Sayed in Gaza City for us. Gaza was in complete darkness overnight, Yumna. There have been new airstrikes this Tuesday morning. Just bring us up to speed with what's been happening and the latest casualties there.
Folly, let me start with the latest. As you mentioned, 3 airstrikes, major airstrikes on residential homes now in the northern part, in the central and in the southern part of Gaza Strip have happened in about an hour ago. The latest was the house that was targeted in Khan Yunis, the southern strip. Local sources say that the house was targeted on top of the people in it. We have they have wrote out at least 5 people killed and dozens of injuries of all these 3 targets on residential homes. While the targeting still continues, we can still hear on top of our heads in Gaza City the sound of war jets, Israeli war jets in the skies, looming over our heads. Now, when it comes to the shortage of electricity, already the past days, Gaza has only been operating with 4 hours of electricity after the Israeli energy minister decided to disrupt the lines feeding Gaza with 120 megawatts of electricity that the Palestinian Authority pays Israel for, and now Palestine or Gaza is just operating with 4 hours of electricity from the Sol power plant, giving only 80 megawatts of maximum electricity. The Sol power plant has made warnings saying that at maximum 2 days it will run completely out of fuel if no fuel enters the strip. This is the 4th day of war on the Gaza Strip with no fuel, no any kind of aid entering the Gaza Strip.
And we're hearing some on the background there as you talk to us, some what sounds like planes overhead. Yumna, also we've been getting this morning some very gruesome and very difficult pictures of injured people and the scene inside Gaza's hospitals. The bombing seems to have been indiscriminate, lots of children injured, journalists being targeted as well. Talk to us about the situation inside Gaza's hospitals. Of course, as you said already, there's very little electricity, water and food. What is the situation inside Gaza's hospitals right now?
In Gaza's hospitals, they are overwhelmed with people, not just killed people. The morgues are full. They've had to adjust tents outside in the yards of the hospital as extension to the morgues to carry the bodies. Those who can take their killed and bury them right away do that because of the lack of space, while all the hospital sections are filled with injuries. The hospitals are telling us that any light or moderate injuries are not even kept in hospitals. They used to ask them to leave the hospital, but now with all the intensive targeting and bombardments across the Gaza Strip, normal residents are going to the hospitals across Gaza to take shelter in the yards of the hospital. They're not inside the premises of the hospital itself, but outside in the yards, at least to find a safe refuge of the bombardment or the continuous bombardment that is especially targeting homes without prior notice. Yesterday, Al Jazeera we had to evacuate from our bureau in a building in a Rimal neighborhood after we got warnings to evacuate Rimal, the entire Rimal neighborhood. We came here to Hajji, which is just the opposite of this street from where I'm standing. At about 2 a.m. in the morning, we got a warning to evacuate Hajji because it's going to be bombarded. Everyone evacuated quickly. Everyone was here in the street and here at the Ritz Hotel, even residents from around this area.
Right.
The hotel lobby was packed with people just there on the floor. But then the journalists who died in the attack yesterday were in a neighboring building to Hajji, and that building was the one that was bombarded without prior notice. And that's why these journalists and dozens others were injured in that bombardment.
Nowhere in Gaza is safe. Civilian homes are being bombed, hospitals are overwhelmed, and people are trying to find safety wherever they can. Yumna Al-Sayed, thank you for the update. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the airstrikes on Gaza have only just begun.
I'm confirming that we have started attacking Hamas. What you're seeing is just the beginning. We have killed many of those fighters. Every place where Hamas is active and working will be completely destroyed, and we will continue to intensify operations.
Let's bring in Willem Marx in West Jerusalem for us. Netanyahu, Willem, says this is just the beginning, and he's been talking about stepping up Israel's response. Everyone, of course, is waiting for this much-anticipated ground offensive, but any more information as to when and that's likely to happen and what the Israeli response is likely to be?
In terms of the details of the response, of course, the military here in Israel keeping a lot of those details under wraps, as you might imagine. They have acknowledged throughout the last few days that all options are on the table. Senior politicians in the country calling for the complete destruction of Hamas. Quite how that will be accomplished, though, not yet clear. In terms of the political unity that Mr. Netanyahu, in a public address to the Israelis last night, called for, that will be one of his biggest challenges ahead of any kind of large-scale military operation. He wants to try and bring in some of his high-profile and experienced political opponents here, many of them, though, saying they will not join what's known as an emergency government without some preconditions being met, and that includes that some of his current governing allies are excluded from any kind of cabinet with decision-making powers over this war.
Thank you, Willem, for the moment. Willem Marx with the latest there from West Jerusalem. Let's now bring in Majub Zweri, Director of the Gulf Studies Center at Qatar University. Majub, we heard there from Netanyahu. What do you think his end game is in this?
I think he has no clear vision after listening to all of his speeches and the statements, especially with the crisis of governance he is facing. the information we are getting from inside Israel, there is a serious problem of forming a new government and bringing the opposition to the government. And let's not forget, the whole current situation is being referred to the problem of governance inside Israel because of the radical government formed by Netanyahu, because of the nature of alliances he had made, and led to this kind of confrontational environment. So now, everything, there is a saying in America, everything about domestic politics. So domestic politics of Israel now is actually coming back to the scene again, saying, okay, you need to fix your in-house. And now he's facing a real problem because there is a pressure from the base on him that you need to bring some military expertise to your government, and those are coming from the opponent of Netanyahu, and they have a precondition as we are watching now, and those precondition is actually to disconnect with current alliances,
right.
And that basically will increase the pressure on Netanyahu, and maybe he will give more concessions to award any peace or any kind of negotiation or mediation.
Let's broaden this out a little bit to the region, because the concern has been since this Hamas attack that other countries in the region could be drawn into this conflict. We've already seen some reports suggesting that Iran had a hand in this. And in just the last few minutes, we've heard from Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei, who says Iran was not involved in Hamas's attack on Israel. How significant is this denial?
The statement is very interesting. It's coming from the Supreme Leader, who always try to, as Western analysis, they say he's saying the final words. Saying this is ending all of this stories about Iranian involvement. I think in the last 24 hours, there are a lot of statements coming from Washington saying, actually, we have no evidence that Iran is involved. And now,
despite what Israel has been saying.
Yeah. I think the whole story is diversion of what's happening inside Gaza. Bringing Iran is to say that everything linked to Iran, and moving away from the fact that is Gaza under occupation and Israel has obligation toward occupied lands. And I think bringing Iran is trying to get more support from international community,
from the US,
especially United States, and the enemy of Iran, because they wanted to say that everything in the region bad is happening because of Iran. Personally, I think this is a humiliation to the Palestinians. The Palestinians, they don't need a wake-up call from Tehran to tell them that they are occupied. They don't need someone to tell them that you live under suffering situation. They don't need this. They live this situation, and they decided maybe to tackle this in the way how they decided. Now, someone that disagree with them, that's a different story. But Palestinians, they are behaving based on what they live in each minute.
Right. The Egyptians now in all this. Egypt, of course, has relations with Israel. They've mediated in this conflict in the past. There's a lot of talk right now about the Rafah crossing, the crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Because Netanyahu has said to people in Gaza, leave. But where are they going to go to when that Rafah crossing, as we know, is controlled by Egypt? And then they've shut down the other border as well. So what is Egypt going to do in this situation? This is a very difficult balancing act, I imagine, for the Egyptians. Are they going to open this Rafah crossing or not?
Egyptian is becoming involved in this, actually, in the last 48 hours of two main things. One is having reports saying that Egyptians have actually warned Israelis that something important is going to happen.
Which the Israelis have categorically denied that Egypt had warned them, right?
And now they talk about Rafah. I'm pretty sure that Egyptian will not be easy on opening Rafah for different reasons. They already have steps to demolish all of the places around Rafah gate, and they have no interest to open it. So, and secondly, they want to distance themselves from what's happening as much as they can because of low domestic calculation. Egypt going to
elections,
have elections,
soon,
and they have different calculations. I think what's happening now, they try to distance themselves, pushing toward a peaceful solution, and they want to help on this. But in what capacity? One capacity on their communication and linkage with the Hamas and other organizations in Gaza.
Mahjoub, thank you very much for the moment.
My pleasure.
Let's get more update now, another update on the situation inside Gaza, and speak to another Gaza resident, Rana Shubair, who's a writer and joining us on the phone from Gaza. Rana, thank you very much. As we come to you, we are looking at a live picture of the skies over Gaza and plumes of smoke because there have been 3 new airstrikes this morning. Can you tell us first how you coped, how you're coping under the relentless Israeli bombardment of Gaza?
Yes, ever since the attack started, and especially during the night, the Israeli occupation has intensified their attacks. So, for example, last night, we didn't sleep. It was all bombing throughout the whole night. They were bombing mosques, houses without alerting the residents. Many people died under the rubble while they were in their own homes. I went out this morning to buy some things, and I couldn't recognize the streets because of the enormity of the bombing. Some places have lost their features. I couldn't recognize them. Everything is destroyed. The infrastructure is destroyed. The buildings are destroyed.
Yeah.
The families are displaced. Some of them are being called in the middle of the night and told to evacuate. If they're lucky, they're told to evacuate.
Right.
And so they run in the middle of the night and they have nowhere to go. So it's not easy for any parent or any person living here to cope with this.
Rana, we can only imagine what you're going through right now. And we have seen the utter destruction of Gaza with these buildings leveled to the ground. You say that you went out this morning to buy some things. What are you able to get? Are there supplies available still? Because, as we know, Israel has said no food and no water will go into Gaza. What's left? What is available today?
Well, in these times like these, we buy just the bare necessities. We just buy bread and, some cheese, just basic goods. We're not buying snacks or chocolate bars, things like that. So I was able to get bread, milk, some things for the kids, and because we don't even have an appetite to eat, we're just eating to stay alive, And
are you able to find these supplies? Are you able to find the supplies?
Yes, but not all of the stores are open. Some of them have been demolished, so I had to walk, far to find something. It's not easy. If this goes on for a prolonged period of time, I think it's gonna be a real crisis for everyone. Not only electricity, water, but also a food crisis and a health crisis as well.
Rana, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Rana Shubair, a Gaza resident, talking to us there on the phone about how people are coping and dealing with the relentless Israeli bombardment, a lack of supplies, as she was saying, very little left inside Gaza. Let's get now an update on the situation in Israel. And Rob Reynolds is joining us from Zikim in southern Israel, not far from the Gaza border. We've heard Israel's military saying that it's now in full control of the Gaza border. Can you just tell us about what the situation is there? What's the scene like?
Well, the scene here is one of lots of Israeli army troops moving back and forth, lots and lots of explosions being heard as munitions are fired from areas around here and impacting on Gaza. We can hear the airstrikes and the artillery strikes on Gaza, each one contributing to more destruction of that small enclave. We are told that the Israeli army has sealed off all of the breaches in the fences that were created by Hamas fighters and other Palestinian fighters on Saturday. That is what they say. However, given the enormous intelligence and military preparedness failure that allowed those forces to leave Gaza and kill many, many people, and take an undetermined number of hostages, we must take that with a grain of salt and
Right.
wait and see whether, in fact, the Palestinian fighters in Gaza have other capabilities, other routes, other tunnels, or things of that nature that would allow them to get out and continue to bring the fight onto Israeli soil.
Right.
Otherwise, in Israel itself, there are things have really kind of shut down as a society. Lots of stores, businesses closed. So many reservists have been called up
Yeah.
that there's really in many cases not anyone left to work.
I was going to ask you about that, Rob, if you allow me to pick
all
up.
over the country now.
Yeah, about the reservists. Israel mobilizing a huge number of reservists, 300,000, I believe the number is. Is that visible where you are? Because everyone has been waiting for this imminent ground offensive into Gaza. What sort of movements are you seeing along the border there?
Well, we've seen in some areas large concentrations of tanks. We have seen throughout the past several days the movement of troops in various types of vehicles to the south and to the east, where the border with Gaza continues. We know that the airstrikes and the strikes from gunships on the Mediterranean are continuing, and you know it's had this emptying out effect on Israeli society, where so many hundreds of thousands of men and women in the reservists who had jobs, who had occupations, etc., they've left their jobs very abruptly, and they've taken on put on their uniforms. So this has left Israeli society, businesses, the economy with a huge gap that is impossible to fill at this point. For example, at the hotel where we're staying at, the staff apologized. They said, we don't have half of the people who used to be working here. They're all in the army now.
Right.
And so that's just one small sign of how this huge buildup and call-up of reservists is affecting Israel.
Rob Reynolds with the latest there from the Israel-Gaza border. Thank you, Rob. Now, this is the situation in Gaza, and of course, the war is raising a lot of concern on the global stage. The European Parliament today is set to debate what it describes as the situation in the Middle East, and it comes a day after the EU announced that it was suspending Palestinian aid. But France is not in favor of suspending aid that benefits Palestinians. For more on this, let's go to Natasha Butler in Paris. Natasha, it's not just France, but a number of countries against this idea of suspending aid to the Palestinians. Bring us up to date.
Yeah, look, and we have to clarify that, because what's happening today is that EU foreign ministers are meeting. It's a virtual meeting. They're going to be discussing the situation, particularly this question of financial aid to the Palestinian territories, because on Monday, the commissioner in charge of this announced that this aid would be suspended in response to the attack on Israel by Hamas. However, that was a decision, it seems, taken almost unilaterally by that commissioner. A number of member states, including Spain and Ireland, said that they were very concerned by that. And that is why the EU then had to backtrack on that and say, look, it's not been suspended for the time being. We're going to discuss that later in this meeting and see what we decide. But what we do know is that a number of member states, including France, including Spain, Luxembourg and Ireland, are saying that humanitarian aid for the Palestinian territories must continue to go through, particularly at this time when it is so urgently needed. And we understand that the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has said that humanitarian aid would not be affected if other aid was frozen.
Right. And so what then can we expect from that meeting, and how united have the Europeans been in their response to the events in Gaza, Israel?
I mean, we've heard almost universal condemnation from a number of member states across the European Union of Hamas's attack on Israel. There is, of course, a lot of concern about the situation now, a lot of concern for the plight of the Palestinian people, which is why so many member states say that it is absolutely essential that humanitarian aid continues to get through to Palestinians on the ground. We also know that within the European Union there are divisions on what should happen next, because there are some member states who are in favour of suspending aid, who say that it is very critical to send a message that this is wrong. There is concern as well that some of this aid has perhaps gone into the hands of Hamas. Now, the EU has always said that its aid goes to NGOs on the ground, it goes to help refugees, it goes to help the Palestinian Authority pay civil servants' wages, for example, that this money is not going into the hands of Hamas directly or indirectly, but that will be something as well that will be discussed at this meeting. But as you can imagine, all member states looking at this very closely. They don't all agree. That's often the case in the European Union. There are 27 member states. They don't always have the same point of view, but no doubt they all share the sense of urgency.
Thank you, Natasha, for that. Natasha Butler live there in Paris. Let's now cross over to John Hendren in Washington, D.C. John, Natasha was saying there are divisions within the European Union, but unconditional U.S. support for Israel is the only thing that Republican and Democrats can agree on there.
Yeah, you're not seeing that kind of division here. The White House is currently bathed in blue and white light, the colors of the Israeli flag. And that's a powerful statement about where American sentiment lies. This is an increasingly diverse country where you have more Arab and Muslim Americans, and you've got pro-Palestinian rallies in the streets, but you're not seeing that response from a unified government where both Democrats and Republicans have agreed. They're actually bickering about who is more pro-Israel. And that's why you're hearing from the Biden administration that they're going to send more military equipment. They're sending a U.S. carrier group to the eastern Mediterranean. They're offering intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to the Israeli military. And while a White House spokesman says they don't foresee any U.S. boots on the ground, there's no talk of that now. They say there is a big U.S. stake here. 11 Americans are now known to be dead in that conflict, more likely among the captives being held there. So until this conflict is over, there's very little talk of any diplomatic solution ultimately in that region, very little talk of a two-state solution while the U.S. government unites behind Israel.
John, thank you for that. John Hendren live there in Washington, D.C. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Iran's supreme leader has denied any Iranian involvement in the Hamas attacks on Israel. He also told an audience at a military academy that Tehran supports and defends Palestine and its resistance. Let's bring in our correspondent in Iran's capital, Dorsa Jabari. Dorsa, there's been days of speculation about Iran's role in the Hamas attack, and the supreme leader there denying any involvement. How significant is this denial, and what more did he have to say?
Well, certainly, Foley, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is the commander-in-chief of the country's entire armed forces. So his word is extremely important and significant. He was speaking at a graduation ceremony at Imam Ali Military University here in the capital, where he spent quite a bit of time expressing his views and the position of Iran when it comes to the events that have unfolded in Gaza and Israel. The Supreme Leader said that the accusations that have been hurled that Iran was behind these attacks are nonsense, and that whoever's making them doesn't really understand the Palestinian people, and that it is really to their own detriment. Of course, Iran supports Palestine, and they will continue to do so, but they are not the ones that had anything to do with the attacks that took place. The Supreme Leader also went on to say that that Israel has not only suffered a failure, but he made a point of stressing that they have now suffered irreparable damage to their infrastructure, something that cannot be fixed. He also went on to say that they suffered a blow that they are now, as a result of the blow that they've suffered, the Israelis are changing the narrative so that they are now the victims instead of the oppressors. And that is something that is very, very detrimental to them. And they will suffer the consequences as a result of that.
He also said, Dorsa, that Iran supports and defends Palestine and its resistance. In what way? How is Iran supporting the Palestinians today?
Well, he didn't specify, of course, but from what we know, they are willing to support them in terms of humanitarian aid. When it comes to military support, Iran has denied providing any assistance to the Palestinian resistance groups, but they have said that they are willing to do whatever is necessary, whatever the Palestinian groups will need from Iran, they are willing to provide them with it. But for now, we understand his comments to mean, of course, humanitarian assistance for the time being. And he said that the Palestinian cause is certainly important. It should not only be important to Iran, but all Muslim nations in the world, and they should all come to the aid of the Palestinian people.
Dorsa, thank you for that update from Iran. Dorsa Jabari live there with the latest lines from Iran, where the Supreme Leader Khamenei has denied